In this video, I'm going to show you how I made these awesome charcuterie boards for Christmas presents this year. Welcome to Bacon's Lodge, where I will build many things, fix even more, and try to make it an adventure along the way. So we have these pieces of walnut here that are left over from another project. With it being Christmas time, we're going to be making charcuterie boards. They're pretty popular right now, and people seem to like them, and I thought maybe some of my family would like them. We're going to start processing those out right now. If you're liking the video, please hit the subscribe button. We're making the charcuterie boards, and I showed you a few that I already had scraps already made out of. This is a longer board that needs to be cut up into sections. I want to use this one because it's got this where a branch came off. This, I guess it would be a crotch. I'll have to do some stabilizing with some epoxy through this area along the checks on the side, but I think it'll look really cool. And I wanted to show you why I was picking it. Partially is because once this gets sanded and finished, there's going to be some pretty cool figuring in here. I'm going to figure, no, I'm just joking. I'm going to figure out where I want to cut it. This one's going to be a little bit bigger because it's 17 inches wide at the largest part. So I've been kind of making them about 18 inches. I think this one's going to be going at least 20, maybe 21. The reason why is because if you're that long that way, you kind of want it to be a little bit more proportionate. I am going to be cutting here because the checks here are pretty big and there's some where it broke off wherever whoever cut this. So I got to clean that off too. What we're going to do is mark this out. I'll get it cut up. And when I'm marking it, since there is no square edge that I'm going off of on the two sides, I'm kind of figuring out what would look the squarest to the grain, because if you go like this and the grain is running like this, it's going to look all funny. So unless you're trying to make a specialty shape, this is just trying to be more square. And what we'll end up having to do is round these corners off a little bit on both sides. And now you can't be 100% square with the grain. Just kind of trying to make it look overall. And just because I make a mark doesn't mean I actually have to cut it there. So I have the two marks here. In pencil, you don't want to use like a Sharpie or something, because the Sharpie will sink into the pores of the wood, and it'll make a mark that's a lot harder to get rid of. This you can sand off in next to no time. But so I'm looking at it, making sure it kind of looks symmetrical, because we got this big knot here. We kind of want that somewhere near the middle. I'm going to remeasure just to make sure that I'm as square as I can be. 22, 22. Like the old saying goes, you should measure twice, cut once. I'm not usually that great at it. Today I'm going to try to be. That's where we're going to cut it. Well, here's my fancy jig that I made up. I clamped a square 1.1 inches off the line, because the 1.1 inches is where the fence is on this one. And that should help me keep it nice and square. So we're working on this charcuterie board here. And you see that there's this bark in here. So we got to get that out of there. We're going to cut it out, and then we'll actually probably open up these other little cracks here a little bit too. So that way when we put it in epoxy, it'll fill those all up. Now that I got the groove all cleaned out and I opened up this other crack, you may ask, why did I open up this other crack? Is because there was no way the epoxy was going to be able to get in there easily. And if you just tried to pour it over top, it would just cause a ton of bubbles. Now we have to figure out where we need to tape, like the cracks here, so that I can submerge the top of this in epoxy so it'll sink into there and fill those up, and over here and over here. So we got to figure out where we're going to need to tape on this. To do that, we flip it over, try to see if any of the cracks are coming through, which they are over here, and a little bit over here. Actually, I have to sand this a little bit so that I can get taped to adhere to it. I'll get that done real quick. I sanded on the back side of it for a while to get it smooth. And as I was doing that, I decided that I wanted to take this slush here. The reason why I cut it off, here's the piece I cut off. There's all these little gaps in here that I don't think I could get that where I can get it sanded and clean. With that being said, what we were working on before is figuring out where we had to tape off so that cover this in epoxy, it doesn't come all the way through. So when you flipped it over, you can see that there's a crack there and there, little one here, and a crack here. So we're going to take our tuck tape. This tape is used for sealing vapor barrier on houses. It works really well for this because it's really sticky and it'll stay. But once you're all done, you can remove it, and it doesn't leave a huge film. But it'll seal really tight so that the epoxy won't come through. So basically, anywhere where I think that there's a possibility that the epoxy might come through, I'm going to go in and put some tape on it. And with this, siding on the side of caution is better, because having epoxy flow through it just makes a giant mess, and it's a waste. So I'm going to cover up areas that I don't think that there's even a chance it can come through, but just in case, I'd rather have it on there. The tape's pretty cheap. I actually have a lot of it. That's why you see it. I use it all the time to hold my air hoses together, because all of the different air hoses have different size fittings for some wonderful reason. And I'm too cheap to buy a good system. You'll see I'm leaving it along on the top here. That's because that way the epoxy can also sit up against that. This is actually the first time I've done epoxy where I didn't put it in a mold. Usually I build a form around it and make it into like a square or a rectangle or something like that. Now that one should be ready to go. I got a couple more that I got to prep up, and then we'll mix up some epoxy. The epoxy that I used is the liquid glass 2 to 4 inch thick pour. You mix it 2 to 1, so 2 parts of the A and 1 part of the B. It's a really liquidy system. It would be better if I would have used a tabletop, but this is what I had, so this is what I used. For the pigment, I used the Eye Candy pigments. Their color is Ronin Black. The stuff is really nice. It gives it a nice little shimmery effect in the black part of it. It's not truly, it's lighter black, so almost like a charcoal color when it's done. If you need different colors, they offer tons of them. I like the blues a lot because it gives a little, like, almost metallic sparkle in it. Then after I get this all poured out, I use a heat gun and a spoon. The heat gun is to pop the bubbles, you'll see. Then I kind of use just a spoon to push it into the cracks a little bit. I end up coming back later and actually submerging the entire tops on all of them. And then it leaks out over the place and I have to clean it up, but that happens too. It's been about a week, and these are the boards after they had the epoxy on them. What I'm doing now is I'm just removing the tape. This method of just taping the edges, I had never actually tried it before. It worked out okay. Just make sure you put it over plastic, because it seems like however hard you tape it down, like, because I sanded ahead before to give it a good surface, but it still leaked out a little bit. Not a ton, but enough where if you didn't have it on plastic, it could ruin whatever's underneath it. So when I'm taking off this tape, it's really sticky, which is what you want, because that way it'll hold it in, but it's kind of a pain in the keister, as you can see. But it leaves by these marks here. And we'll show you how we're going to clean up. So basically, I have to resurface everything again. You could just cut it off if you wanted a straight edge like I will on the sides here. But I want to leave the live edge effect as much as I can. But before we do any of the edge surfacing, we're going to do the surfacing first. A lot of surfaces, and that surfaces and stuff. But anyways, so we're going to resurface the top and bottom first. I'll start with, I'll show you this one. So like, you need to have one face that's flat. This is the top. If you just come and sand off, there's this sharp edge. I doubt you can see it on there, but where it kind of cups up when you do the epoxy. If you sand that off and get that smooth, that'll give you almost a perfectly smooth surface, because this is the epoxy self-leveled. Then when you flip it over, this one had came through, so there's bumps on the bottom here. I could also sand these off, but I think the other one will actually give me a truer surface. I keep saying surface. You can have a drinking game with this one, how many times I say surface. But then once we get this all smoothed out, we'll go back through and sand them again, and make them look pretty, and then we'll put some finish on them. Okay, so I just sanded those down. But basically, I was just getting them smooth enough so they could fit through the planer. Next step is going to be to run them through the planer and try to smooth them out and make them so nice. You're going to see that the epoxy on the top is going to disappear. Also, when you're sanding epoxy, make sure you're moving your sander a lot more, because the friction it'll almost melt the epoxy, so you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you keep it moving pretty good. So I was just planing up those charcuterie boards, and my shop vac started smoking. So I think that guy's dead. It's still a little smoky in here. But what's really exciting is outside it started to snow pretty good. So I'm going to go show you guys that, because I like snow and it's pretty awesome. So some people don't get to see snow. So I thought I'd bring you out here and look at my ugly face and show you some snow. I'm going to try to get something with some contrast in the background so you can actually see it. I got some arborvitaes over here. They're pretty dark. Let's go see if we can see the snow. I mean, you can see the snow on the ground. You can see it kind of falling there over my shoulder. It's December 19th, so just before Christmas. It looks like we might have a white Christmas. Plenty ice, thank you. Now I got to go figure out what I'm going to do about dust collection because I kind of like my lungs and I don't want to be breathing in dust particles as a sand. So I'll get back to you when I figure that out. So I went to Harbor Freight and picked up a fancy dust collector because the other one died. But with that, they didn't have any 4-inch hoses, and no one in town had 4-inch hoses. So I had to downgrade to my 2.5-inch hose, and then that's downgraded to the 1 3/4 hose that I have hooked up to the planer. That's how things got to work for right now. In the future, I'm going to get a dust extractor away as well. But for right now, this will do pretty good. I'm going to finish planing the boards here. I'm not going to have you look at that. And then when I get back to sanding, I'll show you that. I've sanded them all down to 120 grit. That's where I'm going to leave the sides and the back. Now for the top, I'm going to do what's called water popping. Usually I'd spray it with a water bottle, but I can't find one right now. So this is another way to do it. I just wet this down with water, and I'm basically just going to saturate the top enough so that it's wet. I mean, not like soaked, but enough where you can see the water. That way it dries quickly. What this does is it raises the grain. So when you're sanding it, all the fibers of the wood, they kind of go like this. You're smushing them down. So when you get it wet again, it brings it back up, and then you can sand those off and make it so it ends up being a lot smoother. If you do this a couple of times through the progressions, with this being a charcuterie board, I'm not going too fine because it eventually would be possibly cut on, and it's not meant to be like super high quality. But if you were trying to sand something to a smoother finish, you would do this after every progression or two. So like between your 120 and 180, and then you go, so that you do that one between there, then you go between 240 and 320, you do it again. That's all I'm gonna do. Just let it dry back up, and then I'll show you me sanding the rest of it up. Okay, so I just did the 240 grit sanding on it. While I was doing it, I kind of want to explain how I sand it. This is a random orbit sander. When I'm using it, I'm kind of thinking I'm with my wife and I'm slow dancing. So I'm slowly going forward, and I don't know if you watch me, I'm rocking back and forth in this direction or this direction. I'm swaying. So I'm putting I don't want to wreck this. I'm putting very little pressure on the top of the machine. I'm actually lifting up on the hose so it doesn't push down. Basically, all I'm putting on the pressure on the top of it is just putting it so it keeps it level. I'm not pushing down, because if you push down, it'll tear into the wood. Example I was given when I was a kid in high school was treat it like a woman and it'll be good to you. If you treat it rough, it won't be. Nice and gentle, and if you dance with it, you'll get a much better product if you don't. I listen to music while I'm dancing, so if you listen to something slower, it's a little bit easier to do it with. Hopefully that's helpful to anybody. The next progression is 320, and that'll be the last one. I'm only doing the 240 and the 320 on the surface of it, on the tops, not on the bottoms, because the bottoms they're going to get feet, and they don't need to be as smooth. Saves a little bit of time and a little bit of energy. So I'll do the next one, and then after that, I'll show you how we're going to treat these. So that's the end of the 320 grit. I want to go a little bit more over sanding. You may wonder why I have a moving blanket underneath here. It's honestly, it cushions it a little bit as you're sanding it, but it also holds it in place. If you leave it on the hardwood, it'll just slide all over the place. And having a towel or moving blanket or something underneath it helps it be a little bit nicer. Also, when I'm sanding this, I start going cross, and I go forward and back. And then I go lengthwise, and I go left to right or right to left, whatever, over it twice. And in between each motion, I take it's a microfiber. This is just a microfiber cloth, and I wipe it down. Dust control on the sander, but it still leaves some on here. And if you remove that dust that's on here, it'll give you a finer finish. So other than that, what do you think of my new shirt? My wife says I look better in this than a regular sweatshirt. So give me a comment on that one. Let me know which is better, this one or the sweatshirt. I think this one maybe, because I look better in it, but I want to know. Next step is we're going to be putting mineral oil on this. So I'm going to kind of have to reset the program here, and then we'll get that going. So this is just a lid off a storage bin. I just have it here to catch any of the mineral oil that drops off. So we're going to be using white mineral oil. The reason why you use this on cutting boards or charcuterie boards or anything that's going to be with food is it's considered food grade. A lot of varnishes and stuff you don't want to use because they can hurt you. Also, with that being said, I had to put epoxy in some of these and CA glue. So that's why these shouldn't be used as a cutting board. Because if you cut into epoxy, it can chip and get into your food. And epoxy is not something you really want to eat because it's not edible and it can harm you. So there is a difference. And if you're ever shopping for charcuterie boards or cutting boards or fancy ones, are really end grain cutting boards, if they use epoxy in them, you shouldn't be cutting on them. You can use them for this. This is just a display. The idea of a charcuterie board is that you're just going to display cheese and crackers and sausage and all that great stuff on it. Maybe chocolate or something like, I don't know, whatever you want to put on it. But you're not going to be cutting on it. You could cut on it as long as you stay in the areas where there's no epoxy. But I prefer if people wouldn't, just because I don't need anybody getting sick. Now that I'm off my little high horse, we're going to be using the white mineral oil. This is it's a soft Scotch Brite pad. You use it to apply it because you can buff it into it a little bit and it'll absorb it a little bit. So yeah, it's basically just, you're going to take some, pour it out on there. Like I said, I have it on here just because there's going to be extra and you're going to have it slopping all over the place. And you're just going to kind of buff it in there. You could submerge it if you wanted to really soak it and let it have it absorb in there. I don't have it enough to submerge all the boards I need to do. But you can see how fast it's absorbing it. I put quite a bit on there and none of it's falling off. So my Scotch Brite absorbs some of it, but I can actually see it in the sapwood, the edges of the boards. It's already dry. So I keep trying to apply more to it. Then you're going to, on the sides, you're just going to cover with what you have on your Scotch Brite, or you can use a rag too. This is just kind of helps buff it in a little bit. And you're going to get messy doing this if you do it. I mean, it's like oil, so it's not like it's like if you had vegetable oil or olive oil in your hands. So it's not like it's the end of the world, but just know that it is kind of slimy. I gotta pour some more out. What's nice about this is if you have this over time and it does dry out, you can just reapply it. You can reapply any oil, any food grade oil. Mineral oil it lasts a little bit longer, but if you were at home and it looked really dry or it lost its sheen, but I'd use like an olive oil or canola oil or even a peanut oil. That just depends on allergies. So, okie dokie, I'm going to run through the rest of it. Okay, now that I have them all covered, I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so, and I'm just going to keep my Scotch Brite handy. And if I see the edges on the top, because I left the top surface up, I'm just going to keep running and adding some oil to it. So I got to let this soak in overnight. Like I said, I'm just going to keep over here, just reapplying. This one's really soaking up a lot of it, so I'm going to keep applying to it. And then I'll let these soak overnight. And then tomorrow we'll come back, we'll buff them out a little bit, and we're going to put some feet and handles on them, and then they'll be done and ready for Christmas. For these boards, I like them to have these they're little rubber feet. I got them from Amazon. I got this entire bag, 120 pieces. It was like $10. You can do a lot of boards with those. Yeah, you probably lose some too. But so there's just these little rubber feet. Kind of hard to show you. But we're going to put these on here because I think it makes it nice so that it stands off the ground a little bit. And then also I have in my tool pit just some handles. They're door pull handles. And we're going to be mounting those on there. To do that, I made this little jig. There's two bigger holes. Those are set up for the door pull or the handle. And then there's a little hole here. That's for the foot. So to use it, I'm on the side here. For the foot, you line up this corner. So you flush that side and you flush the side kind of the best you can because it's the live edge. And then you drill a hole down in there. You can put the little screw in there. You do that on all corners. And then for the handle, you flip it over and you want to do those on the top because that way they'll be in the right area. But you just line up the front side and then you eyeball it so that it's about a center. You could measure it, but I think eyeballing it's a little bit better because that way you can kind of see. So I'm gonna do that now. So I got it lined up where I want it. Find the little hole and just, there you go. And then take the little foot and this really small screw. That'll work. Usually I do all four, but I don't want you to have to watch me. So I'm going to flip it over. We're going to change over our drill bit here. I'm going to flush that up, set it about where I want it. I didn't drill all the way through with the template there because I don't want to have it widen those holes out too much. So now I'm just going to go, I'm going to set my, over my pit of doom and then drill through. I'm pretty sure this board's going to be too thick for the screws that came with it. What I'm going to do to resolve that is I'm going to countersink these. And I could go buy a fancy countersink, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a bigger drill bit, one that's bigger than the head of the screw, and we're just going to sink these down a little bit. You don't want to go too deep. We're going to hope that works. It should work. There you go. Nice little handle. Pretty clean in the bottom. So yeah, I'll probably just put you on time lapse and finish these up. These actually turn out really good. The epoxy was a black pigment, so it kind of gives it like a shimmery look. It's a nice little Christmas gift you can give to your family or something. The hardest part is acquiring the walnut. It's nice to make something for gifts for family and friends. I think it means a little bit more, at least for me, to them that I made it instead of just went out to the store and spent a bunch of money on it. Thank you for watching the video. I do appreciate it. Hopefully you've subscribed. I get a decent amount of people watching this, and as of today, I'm up to 65, which I'm actually excited about because last time was 58. So we're moving. I'm going to keep plugging at it. Hopefully you guys like it. Give me comments if you can think I can improve anything. If not, have a Merry Christmas because that's what's coming up here. May God bless you and have a great day.